Hi, friends. This is Will Parker. I'm here together with my co-host, Jen Schwanke. And before we jump into this week's episode, Jen, this is going to be a conversation with George Couros, one of my edu heroes. So I can't wait for listeners to hear this conversation. But we always start with a Q&A. So here's this week's question that came from a survey that I sent out. Check out this one. How do you navigate bureaucracy, especially with frequent shifts in focus that make previous efforts seem irrelevant? Boy, I can read so much into that question, but I'm going to let you start, Jen Schwanke, responding to that Q&A.
No, I think this is an excellent question. And I think the levels of bureaucracy are probably different for all of us, depending on the size of our district, the history of our district, the levels of bureaucracy within higher level leadership. And I actually think, well, you and I thought about digging a little bit more into this in a couple weeks too, with long-term vision and direction. So there's a little teaser to get our listeners to tune back in. But to me, navigating bureaucracy is, I'm going to say, two conflicting things. One is, I think you have to accept it. Bureaucracy drives me absolutely bonkers. I hate it. It seems like such a waste of time, but it is what it is, and there's no erasing it, right? It's going to be there. My brother-in-law works for the State Department, and there's some bureaucracy there that makes me feel grateful for my bureaucracy because, again, the driving me bonkers, it could be worse. And then the second approach, how to navigate it, I have come to ask as many questions as I can without being a jerk. So not, why are we doing this? But more, can you help me understand? Because if I get why we're doing this, I won't be so angry about it. That kind of thing. Approach with a curious mind rather than a defensive or an angry mind.
I'll add a few thoughts to that because you're so right. And I'm glad you said that because I think you do have to try to pick apart the difference between good bureaucracy and bad bureaucracy. I used to think all bureaucracy was bad until I got to meet some people at our State Department several years ago, and I realized how having good people in those bureaucratic positions makes the rest of our lives a whole lot easier. And then I saw some transitions where some not so good people stepped into those roles. And oh my gosh, you talk about life getting really chaotic and unhelpful and things getting more and more difficult. So I have now a high respect for people that can make bureaucracy a good thing and meaningful processes that help you get your jobs done well. So we do have to acknowledge that. At the same time, the tension I'm hearing in this question is I'm pretending I'm a leader who's like, okay, I'm starting off the school year or we're trying to do something new. And now I'm getting a directive from somewhere, the state or my district or the federal government somewhere that's telling me that we have to do this. And it's a completely different shift than where we were going or what we were working on. So how do I lead in the middle of that kind of pressure when I'm getting all these focus change requests? And so I don't know, how would you respond to that?
Well, I think that's real and it's fair and it's okay to be frustrated by that. And sometimes we have to figure out how to make a square fit into a round hole, right? We have to say, okay, how can I continue this work that we started given this new information I have or given these new constraints that I have? Because you're right, Will, bureaucracy is not always wrong. I used to think it was all bad too, but what it does do is slow us down and it makes us have to check all of our boxes, dot our I's and cross our T's. And so if we embrace that, and by that I mean, okay, maybe this is a sign I need to slow everything down, figure out how my vision and my hopes and the work we've been doing fits into this, and then proceed. Because you really do have two choices, right? Well, you can be angry and stop the work, or you can get over it and continue the work in the new guardrails within the new guardrails that you have. So, it is, I too sense tension in this question. I sense frustration. I sense a little bit of disillusionment. And I think that is certainly fair, but it also shouldn't be a screeching halt to whatever work you're doing.
I'll say two more things as we wrap up too. One is the caution of don't immediately assume the worst intentions when someone's trying to ask you to switch focus or implement something new in your school that may be a switch from where you were previously going, because that input may be coming from some place that's not a really bad intention or not trying to make your life worse or not. So people often, when you dig into the reasoning behind a new initiative, for instance, you discover somebody really wanted to help kids and this is the way
Yeah.
that they want to do it. At the same time, I'll say on the other end of that pendulum, there are also times when you've been asked to do something where you can politely and respectfully participate without having to burden all your people with something that you don't want them to invest as much energy in as the things that you know are the most important. So, as a leader, you play that buffer where you learn how to protect your people from feeling overwhelmed by something that may be onerous or maybe task heavy. So, so you have to use wisdom. You have to know, like, how do you keep them on the thing that's the most important thing, but also complying to things that are required or that are expected, but in ways that where you can help them kind of gauge, hey, this is an area that we're going to put this amount of energy into because that's all the energy we have left for this. Well, whereas this area is an area where we're really going to invest our time and focus. So, Jen, I know that, man, that 5 minutes went fast, but as we wrap up, any other thoughts you want to add?
No, I think we need to talk more about this though. I seriously do, because I think we need to talk about when you play buffer and when you play all right, guys, we're all in on this. Let's talk
Mhm.
about that more some other time.
Let's do it. Well,
Okay.
Principal Matters listeners, you're going to love today's conversation with George Couros. Thanks for listening to this week's Q&A. You can always find resources and content like the conversation Jen and I are having at my website at williamdparker.com. Or Jen, they can always reach you at your website. What's it?
JenSchwanke.com. Easy to remember.
All right. Thanks for doing what matters and enjoy today's show. Principal Matters Podcast, episode 426. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. This week, we're going to be talking about what makes a great principal with my special guest, George Couros. George Couros is a worldwide leader in the area of innovative teaching, learning, and leading, and has a focus on innovation as a human endeavor. Most importantly, he's a proud father and husband. His belief that meaningful change happens when you first connect to people's hearts is modeled in his writing and speaking. In his 20 plus years in the field of education, he has worked at all levels of the school from K-12 as a teacher, technology facilitator, and school and district administrator, and as an adjunct instructor. He is the author of several books, including The Innovator's Mindset, Empower Learning, Unleash Talent, and Lead a Culture of Creativity, Innovate Inside the Box, and Because of a Teacher, and Because of a Teacher Too. And his newest book, What Makes a Great Principal, The Five Pillars of Effective School Leadership, is co-authored with Allison Apsey. George Couros, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and I can't believe I've never had you on the show, but welcome to the
I was
podcast.
thinking the same thing. I'm like 426. Like you've done 420 episodes. You've never invited me on. What the heck?
Here's
I've
I've been
been
waiting
talking
for the
forever.
perfect time, and
Today's
now
the
it's the
day.
perfect time.
Okay,
So
I
I want
getcha.
you,
I getcha.
most of my listeners will be familiar with you and your work, but for those who aren't, feel free to fill in the gaps on that intro. Why don't you tell people something they may be surprised to know about you?
Well, you mentioned, I always try to look at everything through the lens of a dad, and I don't know if that's always the best thing, right? Because there is a bias there, but I think the really important thing for me is that I want the same thing for my kids I want for every single kid in our schools. And I think it's not only just the kids, it's the adults too. And I think one of the things we always are really cognizant is that we don't talk about students as much as we talk about learners, and really kind of focusing on how do we help all people achieve. Because you can't say like, hey, we want to really help kids fulfill their dreams, but too bad teachers. So you're stuck. So I think that's something that's really important to me. I love the work that I do. I'm really passionate about it. But I think over the last few years, specifically, I've really been able to focus really deep on things I'm doing and, be really present in that, and then go outside of it and do other things and not focus on the work. And I think that's actually made my work better, which I think is something. There's this idea that if you don't focus on your work all the time, somehow it will lessen you. But I think it brings you some really good perspective, and gives something for the kids and people you aspire to, right? Like we're just working to work and that's our whole life, I don't think that's a good thing. So, you know, as we talked before we got on the podcast, moved to Orlando. I know you know, I'm a huge basketball fan.
Uh-huh.
The first thing I did when we moved here is got Magic season tickets, even though like I hate it. I was like, I don't really care about the Orlando Magic. Now I'm the biggest Orlando Magic fan ever,
Of course.
over the past few years. Yeah. And, you know, I think that's a really important thing for me um, is really making sure that we take care of ourselves personally so that we can thrive professionally and putting that thing first. I think that's not
That's so
necessarily the
important.
focus. Yeah.
Well, I have a book called Pause, Breathe, Flourish: Living Your Best Life as an Educator that leads into a lot of conversations that I've seen you modeling, and I know especially from COVID till now, one of those passions for you has been personal fitness.
Uh-huh.
And you're right. When you take time to focus on something that builds you or strengthens you in other areas of your life, there's this weird dichotomy that happens. You get better at work. And
Totally.
so it's this strange phenomenon that, and when I work with leaders who feel like they don't have time to take care of themselves, what they're really giving up at that moment is an opportunity to be better at what they do. And
Well, 95% of my ideas are come when I'm running.
Mhm.
I honestly believe that. It clears my head and
Mhm.
then idea hits me. And you know, I try not to do anything on my phone. I listen to music when I'm exercising,
Yeah.
but it is handy to make sure I don't lose that thought, right? And I'll write some
Yeah.
notes down. And I'll just write blog or,
Uh-huh.
keynote or something like that. And I'll just write down a few notes. And then after the run, and I don't feel I had that before. I don't feel I had some of that clarity that I needed. And
Yeah.
the idea is sometimes you have to, um, if you want to solve problems, you have to step away from them, right? And it
Mhm.
gives you a different perspective. So I think that's something that's really, really helped me in, you know, my own health over the last few years for sure.
No, that's powerful. Well, you and Allison have written a brilliant book. Thank you for letting me have a copy. And what I loved about this was not only the input from the both of you as practiced and experienced leaders, but man, you filled it up with some heroes in the field. And I just want to list them because I was so impressed that you guys pulled this many collaborators in for
Yeah.
testimonials and stories. But Marcus Balin, Ryan Daniel, Vicki Davis, David Domina, Emily Freeland, Liz Garden, Brad Gustafson, Mary Hemphill, Mike Kleba, Carrie Lansney, Abby Ramos Stanitz, CJ Reynolds, Shane Saeed, Vincent Taylor, and Taylor Tiemann. And I apologize for any mispronunciations,
Yeah.
but I wanted to mention them because um, just as I should have expected, George, this work is collaborative because you realize how much more you can communicate together. But I want you to just talk for a minute about why was it collaborating with these leaders such an important part of the message of your book?
Well, you know, it does go back to the Because of a Teacher books, and Because of a Teacher kind of came from the idea, I always kind of I joke about this, but it's also kind of horrible and serious. Is that, and I'm sure you remember. Do you remember like the 2 weeks that everyone loved teachers during
Mhm.
COVID?
Yeah.
It was 2 weeks
Brilliant.
only, and then it was like worse than ever.
Yeah.
And I feel there's this animosity in education, and it really bothers me because I had really great teachers. I love my school experience, and it's funny because I was also like a behavioral issue, but I also loved school. And you
Mhm.
know, I think I was a behavioral issue for certain teachers, and I was awesome for others. And you know,
Okay.
that tells you something right there. And it was not them. It was like you could tell, like it was always my science teacher, which is the subject I always struggled most with in school. And the questions that we focused on were, you know, who's a teacher that inspired you, who's an administrator that inspired you, and what advice you'd give to your first year teacher self. And it started as a podcast, but then it became a book, and you know, it basically became like a chicken soup for the teacher soul.
Mhm.
And then like there was always kind of this hope to do a principal version of it, and Allison and I talked about it, and I really I thought about it and I'm like, it's not, I just don't want to just do the same thing, but a principal version.
Yeah.
There's just something. So it took me about a year, and I actually read Allison's book, Leading the Whole Teacher, which I absolutely loved. And, and then I read it, I'm like, I love this book. It is so good. Like, I'm so proud of you. It is my favorite book of hers, that other than What Makes a Great Principal. Right? No, that's my new favorite book of hers because, me too. But she just did such a good job of really weaving in research to the idea of like, how do you support teacher wellness in your school? And it's not really my strength. It's not my strength. Like, I look up research, but it's hard for me to write it because I find it really boring. And she did a really compelling way. So I thought, if we're going to do something for a principal, let's make this something that, improves them in a professional stance and, is backed up by research, but also can it be a hybrid of, for example, leading the whole teacher and because of a teacher. So that's what it became. So basically, I wrote a story to back up why a pillar was important. Allison said, here's the research that backs us up. But we wanted the perspective of not just principals. So we made sure that was at least one former or current principal write about each pillar and a strategy and a story and something that compelled them, but really from the people we served, whether it's instructional coaches, teachers. You mentioned Taylor Tiemann. She wrote it from the perspective of a student. And I will tell you, I know this sounds weird, but I have been reading the book myself. And it's the first time I've read it from the viewpoint of not editing it, like, because it's the editing's done. There's nothing I can do now. So it is what it is. But really from just the viewpoint of someone who's trying to learn. And as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have had this when I was a principal, because there's stuff that I would have never said. Like, it's not like I never was a teacher, but it just, there's something sometimes you miss when you're making that transition, that you start thinking in a little bit different way. And from hearing from current teachers about principles that really inspired them and different perspectives. And I think, when you look at the pillars on the cover, they're very intentionally looking different. And the reason why is Alice and I really believe that those 5 pillars are really necessary, and they were relevant 100 years ago, and they'll be relevant 100 years from now. But it doesn't mean that we have to do the exact same things. And like, even Alice and I, like I even mentioned, I'm really good at telling stories, and she is too, but she filled in a blank in an area that I wasn't as good at. And I knew this, and that's actually how I hired. I didn't try to hire George clones. I tried to hire people different from me because they had perspectives that I didn't do. And I think that was where this book really came together, was from the perspective of, the staff, and many of them are still teaching right now. Taylor Tiemann literally just started teaching, but that's why I asked her to write it from the perspective of a student. And yeah, I am really honestly so proud of this book, just because I think it is different from. I honestly, I don't think there's an educational leadership book out there like this, because it's really written from the perspective of the people we serve. We always talk about how important that is, but do we actually, create books that hear from them? So I think that's where that really is different.
Yeah. I love it that you're writing it. And first of all, let me just give the audience a moment for me to geek out on George Couros. But in 2012 or 2013, you came to Oklahoma and spoke at our Principals Association fall conference. And I got to be present to hear you back then. And you were so generous, as you are with everyone. But this is Will's story of your generosity. You gave me your phone number. You told me if you ever need any help. You saw that I had written my first book, and you're like, hey, good job. And if you ever need to collaborate, let me know. About a year later, I was invited to my very first speaking opportunity out of state. And I had never done that. And I wasn't even sure like what kind of agreement to write or anything. And I picked up the phone, found your number, called you. You answered in the middle of a Canadian airport and said, hey, Will, can I call you back in 15 minutes? I just landed. You did. And then you gave me undivided attention to just help me problem solve that situation, and gave me some confidence to take that next move. And, fast forward, today, I'm doing this work full time now, George.
It's awesome.
As a podcaster and an author and a trainer and all that stuff. But you have been, when I saw the 5 pillars in this book, you've been practicing these things for a long time. And I think you've also had enough time to be outside of the work you did as a leader and spend a lot of time with leaders. So you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, let's be frank. And so let's set on these 5 pillars for a minute of
Yep.
why you guys chose these as the ones that you're like, guys, this is where you've got to build.
Yeah, well, we actually, and first of all, thanks for that. I actually remember that. I think it was, is it Joy Hoffmeister?
Yeah, she was our state
I remember,
superintendent.
and I remember her actually giving the her phone number to everybody. I'm like, oh, good luck with that. But she was great with it. She was great. So I know. I
Yeah.
think she run for governor? She didn't get
She
it, but I
did.
remember.
She
Yeah,
did. I
she
wish
was,
she had won, but she did not. But she's
yeah. So
she's
she's wonderful. I really appreciated her, and I remember that very unique. There actually, I got to okay, a little side story before we get
Go
to
for
this. So you know I've lost a lot of weight, right?
Yeah.
And this is a little bit, I don't know if it's embarrassing or something I should be proud of. I spoke at Oklahoma, it was like Oklahoma like ISTE affiliate event. I don't know if you
Sure.
remember that. I don't know if you remember what it's called, but there is a gentleman there. I'm pretty sure his first name is Todd, and he's in Texas now. And he knows I'm a huge basketball fan, and he bought me a Kevin Durant Oklahoma City Thunder jersey, right? So I'm excited. I'm like so excited. I'm just a basketball geek. But it didn't fit. I was too heavy. And I kept that jersey. And Kevin Durant's been like, it took me like 4 Kevin Durant teams before it fit, but I still have that jersey. And it fits now. And I'm very proud. I'm very proud. It's too big actually, which it makes me even more proud.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so like I remember those things. Yeah, and I just, it is something that those little moments, like, talking about Joy, talking about Todd, there's things that I think really resonate with you, and people go out of their way to make a personal connection. So I really appreciate you sharing that story with me because yeah, I don't actually remember taking the phone call. I remember actually being with you at that event, and I remember saying that stuff, but I don't remember the call. And I tried to I don't know how far you got into the book, but I had a principal who was like that for me. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm like, that's Kelly who inspired that in me to become that person. But
I love that.
we looked at there's all these leadership frameworks all over, whether it's Australia, whether it's in different provinces in Canada, different states in the United States, that, and we're like, kind of, is there some redundancy here? So I'll give you an example. So relationship builder is the number one thing, and that's a really important aspect. It's something I really strive to do all the time. But some of them will have you have to be an effective communicator. Well, really, if you're good at relationships, you're probably good at communicating. So it was like, is that really a separate thing, or is that something that might fit into this part, right? So I think we looked at like, what are some of the big ideas that we could kind of streamline a little bit, but then also give space where people would say like, well, communication really fits into the idea of relationship builder or talent cultivator, or connected there. So the thing that's really important to me is not to tell anyone what to do. That I think it's just kind of I'm trying to provide, and I think Allison and all the collaborators are focusing on, here's some big ideas, but you fill in the blanks. Like, you have to kind of say, what does this mean to you? What does this look like in your community? Because I don't know your community, right? I've never been to 99% of the communities that are going to read this book. And this goes back to the notion of innovator's mindset, right? Like, if I'm telling you how to be innovative, it's probably not innovative. If I'm telling you exactly the step-by-step process. So that to me is like kind of how we came to that part. And, Alice and I talked about this, but really kind of thinking about some of the language that, like resource maximizer, there's like, that one was a really important one for me. And it was also terrifying because it's one of the most boring things to do in the role of leadership, and really kind of thinking, what does that mean? Because that you've seen this too, right? You're like, hey, we don't need managers, we need leaders. I'm like, you actually need both. Like, you need people who, like, you can have all the vision you want, but if you can't like actually provide the resources and find ways to make those things happen, it's not going to happen. So the one of the first people I reached out to was Brad Gustafson, because I remember hearing him share a story about how he did that. I'm like, Brad, I got this book. I know the pillar I want you to write for, and I know the story, but I need you to talk about it because I don't want to tell it. I need you to tell it. And he said, I'm like trying not to like write with it, but he's like, I will for you. And like that's I was able to call in favors, if that makes sense. And they're all, yeah. So I'm like, that's kind of how we came to that part of it too. So we're hoping that schools and organizations will look at these pillars
Mhm.
and we actually provide that in the book to say, like, okay, what does this look like to you? Like, what are some strategies? How will you know you're effective? Instead of me telling you, filling in those blanks for you. I think that is a really crucial aspect of this.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use iExcel in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? iExcel is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. iExcel gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, iExcel has decades of expertise and is proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across 45 states show that those who use iExcel outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit iexcel.com/PM to learn more.
Hello, Principal Matters listeners. I'm Jethro Jones, a good friend of Will's. It's time for a change. Are you tired of fighting fires, dealing with disengaged students, and missing out on real connections with your staff? Imagine a school where you leave on time, work with parents, and lead with purpose. Since you're a listener of Principal Matters, you're probably already doing a lot of these things. Well, I want to help you take your great work to an even higher level. Join the SchoolX book study, and you'll walk away with actionable strategies to transform and improve your school, manage your time, and reduce your stress. In just 5 sessions, we'll dive into practical tools like design thinking, live sessions, and even explore using AI to lighten your load. This is about creating a school where every teacher, every student, and you can thrive. Don't miss out. Head on over to jethro.site/will and start transforming your school today. That's jethro.site/will. And I'll see you in there soon.
No, I think that's great because you're not being prescriptive. What you're doing is you're inspiring best practice. Let's talk about the big idea. You decide how to implement it. Yesterday, I was thinking about this on my run. I was listening to a podcast by Guy Kawasaki called Remarkable People. I think you'd really enjoy it. And he was interviewing another author. I think it was Kim Scott. I'd have to look. But they were talking about some experiences that she had had in business, in the business world, in the tech world, with some bias and prejudice, that she faced as a woman leader. And she was talking about, working with HR, like going to HR whenever you've got concerns. And I just started in my own mind, kind of not really laughing out loud, but thinking how it's in education, like when things happen, the principal is HR. They're everything.
Yeah.
They're HR, they're teaching and learning, they're relationship builders. And so I wanted to, first of all, just state the obvious that for anyone who picks up this book of what makes a great principal, you and I both know that the word principal encompasses a responsibility of someone whose job is so complex that it would be impossible to write a book explaining all the how-tos. This is, which, I mean, and there's plenty of technical books out there. This one is more of, let's talk about the pillars. And so if it's okay with you, I want to just list the pillars out loud, and then I'd like you to pick a couple to just unpack. So relationship builder is 1, continuous learner is 2, talent cultivators 3, resource maximizer is 4, and visionary is 5. And we've talked a little bit about relationship building, George. So I actually want to go to this question first, because I see you model this so well. Talk about what ways that leaders, how their modeling of ongoing learning is so important if they're going to be leaders of learning.
Yeah, well, this is a lot of people know me because of my blog, my website, whatever you want to call it. But actually, it never started that way. It was I didn't say, like, I'm gonna start blogging. I think people want to hear to say. I still don't think people want to hear what I have to say, but it was very intentional. We wanted our students to have digital portfolios, and we're like, okay, this would be really cool, we think, but we don't know what we're doing. We have no clue what we're doing because we're trying to teach something to our kids that we never have learned ourselves. So as the principal of the school, I said, you know what? I'm going to actually create my own. I'm going to start this. I'm going to go through the process. I'm going to find out some of the good stuff, some of the bad stuff, and then I'm going to teach my staff, and then I'm going to teach my, and then we'll teach our students. So really kind of understand that modeling. And, I was just I looked at, some of the frameworks that, were in Alberta at the time, and started kind of aligning what I was talking to. And I'll tell you that it really pushed my thinking because I was much more aware of what I was sharing, because I knew everyone could read it, including my own staff, including my own, families in my community. So I'm like, I better be really thoughtful about what I'm posting here. But it actually started sparking some conversations. And then, to ask my staff to do this, it wasn't a really hard ask, in the sense that it was kind of like, well, he's already doing it. He can't really, he's not asking to do something he's not willing to do himself. So I've really kind of taken the space. I feel like I'm a little bit of an old school Twitter guy, because I still share my learning. Like, I still share stuff I'm learning, even through the book. As I'm reading it, I'm taking quotes from the different authors and just sharing some of my insights, creating my own connections to what they're sharing as I'm like reading it from the viewpoint of a reader, not someone who's editing and just kind of finished this book. So I think that's what kind of connects us. And I always encourage people, because a lot of people feel like, I don't want to share stuff. I don't feel like I'm bragging. I don't ever feel like I'm bragging, because I'm just sharing my learning. And if you take something away from it, great. And some of my perspectives might challenge you. Some of them might affirm your work. But that's all I've ever tried to do, is kind of model this stuff. Even kind of going back to the health stuff. I don't know how much you follow me kind of through this over the past years. I have really struggled with this, and I've really struggled with my weight over the years, and trying to get, I got in a really bad place, and then health wise, and I would try different things and do this, but I was just kind of sharing that here, because I know that might help someone else. And sometimes like today I was actually on the treadmill, and they're like, wow, you have good genetics. I'm like, I do not have good genetics. Like, you haven't seen where I've been, and what I've had to kind of get to this place. But I think that really helps that stuff too. So it's not as much of a challenge to me saying how important it is to get your health in check when people have seen me doing the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think when you I really try to challenge the idea of, we need to lead by example, as opposed to we need to learn by example. And then that leadership will take care of itself, right? That if people see you modeling your learning, and then you ask them to take risks, they're more willing to do it because they see you doing the same thing.
That's so true. Okay, I'm going to have another geek out moment for just a second, because
I like coming here every week. This makes me feel great.
No, but here's the thing. When, I know that so much of what you've done has just been organically George learning and sharing as he learns, and that creates whatever that next thing is that you're going to do. But it's so funny to hear you tell the origin story of that digital profile, because around the same time I met you, I was really curious, how do you leverage all this technology that's available to create a presence online? Or, I love to write. I was a former language arts teacher, so I wanted to start a blog, and I really didn't have a great model for it. And so I went on Google, or whatever the search engine was back then, and just did a quick search on education leader blogs or whatever. And there you were. And so I was like, well, George Couros does it, so let me look and see how he does it. And so at the time, you were a pioneer. because there weren't a lot of
Google. It's not like you're using Yahoo. It wasn't that long ago.
I don't even know if it was Google. I just know that there were not a lot of other education leaders who had a space at that time.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm geeking out, but people like you and Eric Scheninger and Jimmy Costas, you guys were really pioneers in saying, hey, let's talk about what we're learning. And so that I think that idea of a continuous learner is, I know I'm preaching to the choir to you, George, but I'm saying this for listeners too. But we can't expect to lead cultures of learning unless we still are passionate about learning. And so, a friend asked me the other day, if you could create a course at school, what would it be? And my first response was, well, and I know people have done this, but I would love to have created a content creation course, like teaching kids, because because it became a passion of mine. But but yeah, if we're not modeling a hunger for learning, how do we expect to create places
Right.
of learning?
Yeah. And that, like Eric and I, like we're still connected and we get to see each other every now and then. And we're both kind of like, we still keep our blogs, even though people don't read blogs like they used to.
Right.
And I think that the reason why I think it's important for both of us, it's not about, trying to make our name or anything like that. It is that it really pushes our own learning. And I think that to me is why I do that. There is an accountability. Like I do this still 2 to 3 times a week. And then, I think the concept of content creation is a good one, but there's some purpose in doing this. Like I've seen where people just all of a sudden it's like, I'm speaking. And like, hey, you do whatever you need to do. But like, what am I learning from that? Right. Is this just marketing? I've never really been, and I don't want to offend anyone here. I've never been focused on branding. It's not a thing for me. It's not really a big deal. I understand about, being thoughtful of your presence, because I feel that if you focus on sharing your learning openly, the branding is a byproduct of that. But if you focus on branding, it doesn't necessarily mean you're learning. And that's something that, I've really kind of hold true to my principles and kind of share my own learning. And I think the other thing too is that when I started all this, I wasn't married, didn't have kids, and I am very cognizant that I'm leaving like a diary to my kids.
Wow.
And they're going to see it one day, and in a way that I could have never seen what my parents went through at the same age, and kind of kept that recollection. So you won't see me fighting on Twitter. You won't see me getting on people here too, because, I want, it is important for me to really think about what will my kids see and how my modeling is too. I don't know if you've, there's so much, there's a book that's super viral right now, Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation. I haven't really brought this up publicly, so this is going to probably cause some stuff.
Sorry.
And really kind of talks about, kids shouldn't have devices. They shouldn't have devices till, they're a certain age, shouldn't have social media and all this other stuff. And I get it. Like I understand it, but I struggle with it in the sense that here's a guy, and you know how I know this? Because I see it from Jonathan Haidt's Instagram nonstop, which I'm like, so you should use your phone nonstop. And then all the adults in the comments saying, yeah, kids shouldn't be on their phones. Kids shouldn't be doing this stuff. Or, and it's like, so I struggle with the idea that a lot of doors open up for me from using these devices, and that for me to say, yeah, but I'm going to close them for kids. So I think there's kind of a middle ground we got to find, in the sense that are we actually teaching kids how to use this? Or are we just saying when they're 18, they'll figure it out? When I'm watching a bunch of adults, I'm like, you don't know what you're doing. And geez, some of this stuff is inappropriate. Like, I actually taught a spin class the other day.
Look at you.
Yeah. And there's a reason I'm bringing this up that has to do with the phone thing. So I'm teaching the spin class. I'm there. And one of the participants who I know, phone's going off. She's checking her phone all the time. And I'm like, you got to get off your phone if you're doing this class, right? Like, so I'm thinking about how many adults would be so bothered by kids doing the same thing. But then I watch the adults do it because they're like, well, I'm actually important. Right. So I can do whatever I want. So I think that it's like, hey, we're telling kids don't use this. I don't think that adults really have it down well. And, part of my learning, part of my health journey is, and this is me sharing my learning, is like, hey, I'm not checking Twitter and I'm not checking my email until I get my workout in. Because I know if I get a nasty email, a nasty comment, it will ruin my entire workout. But if I get my workout in, I'm a little bit better equipped to deal with it. So I think even just sharing that and saying, hey, I still use it. I still go on Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and use these spaces in meaningful ways. But I've also learned to create boundaries for myself. And, like my phone could be ringing right now. People could be calling me. I can be getting messages. I actually have all my notifications off. I have all you cannot, I know this even sounds like this is like old school. You cannot even call me. I'll go straight to voicemail 24/7 because I actually never go to my phone when it pulls me. I go to my phone when I feel I should go to my phone. And that's like, that is like, why are we not teaching kids this stuff? And are we modeling it? Right. So I think that like you've been in tons of sessions. You see administrators talk about this, like kids, blah, blah, blah. And then their phone goes off right in the middle of stuff and they walk out of the room. And it's like, come on, seriously. Like you're asking kids to do something you can't do yourself.
So many things I love about that. First, I'm just thinking of the words, how do we use technology redemptively?
Yep.
And I remember in one of your presentations, you have this awesome image of I think it's a train or a subway back in the 30s or 40s, and every person sitting in those seats is reading a newspaper.
Uh-huh.
And then you flip to the next image and it's today, everybody's sitting on their phone and you're like, what's the difference? We have technology has been distracting us and pulling us since the invention of writing. And yet we feel like whatever the current technology is in front of us, that the way we're going to manage it is either banning it or, and I'm not, and by the way, listeners, I'll repeat what George said earlier. None of this conversation is prescribing for you how you should manage your school or yourself or your classrooms. But the point I hear you making, George, is how are we as continuous learners?
Right.
How are we as continuous learners modeling the use of our phones in a redemptive way so that it is a tool that enhances our learning, that therefore we could show our future generations how to redemptively use theirs?
Yeah, that to me is like I always say, there's no black and white with this stuff. It's all gray. We just got to get in the gray. We got to have the conversations from a place of an abundance of information, not a lack of. And like I said, some of the biggest advocates for kids not having devices and not utilizing this stuff do it on social media from their phone. And I'm like, I'm hoping you see the irony here, that you're getting your message out and you're getting it around the world using the thing that you want to take away from kids, and you're not actually understanding this. And like there is, one of the things that I think there's tons of research on this, and like I'm talking about the negatives here, that it really makes people feel bad because they're comparing themselves to a digital presence. And I think part of it too is we get on people for what they share, as opposed to like, hey, like how do we actually learn to deal with this? And the analogy I always use is that there's a huge difference between watching an entire basketball game and then seeing the highlights on ESPN. When you go on social media, you're watching SportsCenter. You're just watching everyone's SportsCenter. But like, do you see the whole game? Like, they're not going to show you the boring parts. And just kind of being thoughtful of that and being shared. And so really, I learned, like even myself, sometimes I get some envy seeing stuff. I'm like, I wish I had that, or I wish I had that opportunity. And then I start to go like, oh, yeah, I'm getting a little bit moody. Maybe it's time to walk away from my phone.
Yeah.
And kind of learning some of those skills, as opposed to, just saying, no, you can't have this at all. Right.
Yeah.
And again, this idea I'm just exploring. Right.
No, but what I love about that is you've spoken to what I think is one of the most important aspects of leadership, which is looking at both sides of the coin. Because what we tend to do is the pendulum swings one way or the pendulum swings another, and we jump on whichever side sounds the most persuasive, instead of recognizing, and you said this word before, the complexity. And the complexity requires you to look at both sides and then determine, based on that complexity, how to leverage this to the best way you can for yourself and for those you're serving.
I think I will be honest with you. I have this little thing in me, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why I'm this way. If I see an overwhelming majority of people supporting an idea, I'm like, okay, I got to look into this a little bit deeper. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something like, am I wrong? Like what's the hypocrisy? And really kind of looking into that, because sometimes I think we just kind of this is the easy fix. You know, I, and this is another, maybe this is why I feel this way. I like my biggest struggle is never, and it's kind of like I'll connect the health to the devices thing. My biggest struggle has always been what I eat. It's always been what I eat. I've always worked out. I've always been good at this. And the thing is, guess what? Like, I'm always going to have to eat. I can't cut out food from my life, but you have to kind of learn how to deal with it. You kind of have to learn how to deal with certain things because I always have to eat. I can't just say, oh, like I've had a bad relationship with food, no more food in my life. And I feel that's, and maybe, and like, again, this is just an idea I'm just throwing out because I've just been thinking about it. I haven't really explored this out loud in any way, that there's always going to be phones. There's always going to be technology.
Yeah.
And are we going to pretend it doesn't exist until a certain age? You know, is this more like alcohol or food? I don't know. You know, so I just think we have to, I always want to try to kind of, I always want to kind of slow down to speed up. Just kind of like, hey, let's just take a step back and see, like, what are we losing here? What are we gaining? I think, and you know, going back to the original when we talked about the digital portfolio thing, the reason I went on first was not just to see the opportunities, but you know, obstacles and what some of the issues would be, so I can kind of guide through when things go wrong. Like, hey, what do you do when you get a nasty comment from somebody? What do you do there? Because I've dealt with it, and here's what I did. Here's how I dealt with it, right? And that's a conversation. You know, like, I don't know if the first time you want someone dealing with that in their life is when they're 18 and they're off to college by themselves for the first year.
Right.
I don't know if that's the best time.
Yeah.
I don't. You think they're like? I'm 49. I struggle with it.
No, there's so
Right.
much wisdom in that. So, you know that, and I know that if I am not careful, we'll go way beyond the time limit.
Hey, you're good. You're good.
That
You
you've
take
given
as
me
long
here.
as you
But
want.
no, but I want to ask you one follow-up question on those 5 pillars because, and this is on vision, and because, but I want to keep it personal, George, because I so appreciate how these things are things you've continued to apply in your own story. How has maintaining a strong vision been helpful for you, not just as a leader, but as a person?
Well, so first of all, when we talk about the visionary thing, one of the who's not listed in the book but is definitely listed in the acknowledgments is Katie Martin.
Mm.
Katie Martin's one of my dearest friends, and I trust her with everything I work on, in the sense that I really struggle. I love writing. I hate editing. I hate it so much. Like, just, I hate it so much. And I just say, and she's really good with it and she enjoys doing it. So I'll send something I write and I'll say, Katie, here you go. Like, do whatever you want. And she's like, do you want me to send you back? I'm like, no, just change whatever. Cause I know she knows how I think and she knows how to clarify some things. So she's really great. So she is so instrumental in kind of helping tighten this book up. And when we wrote the visionary thing, there's a couple of things. First of all, Katie said, you know, innovator's mindset is really visionary in what you talk about. Why aren't you doing that here? I said, because I don't want to define a vision for someone else. That's actually up to the community. Because that to me is really, really important. Is not, hey, I want you to be visionary. Here's what your vision will look like. She's like, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And that's what I love about Katie, because she will actually she'll know what to, like, just change.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll know, like, I don't understand what he's doing here, so I'm going to ask him and he'll talk about this. And so she did reach out to me. But I remember, I think I was working out, and I got an idea, and I called Allison. I said, Allison, visionary, it's got to go last. And she's like, oh, tell me more. And I said, well, because I think sometimes when we are principals, we go into a new school, we have a vision of what we want everyone to do, what we want to achieve, and you haven't even met the people you serve. So and I actually talk about this in the book, that I used to think good teachers would come in 2 weeks early, do all their photocopying for the year, and they could tell you basically, you know, on the second Monday of October in math class in first period, I'll have kids here. and no matter who I get, they'll be there. And I'm like, well, that's what I used to think was really great teaching, but you don't even know the kids yet. You haven't even met them. You don't know where they're at. You don't know if they're ahead. You don't know if they're behind. You don't know any of this, right? So it's more, that was more a teacher focused thing than it is a learner focused thing. So I think that to me was like, hey, you got to know who you're serving. You got to know what you have access to, and you got to create that together. And it's way easier to attain a vision if you build it together as opposed to something you build for others. But I think for me, the vision is it is really connected to the idea of being a continuous learner. I like all the conversation about AI. I'm like, this is new to me, but it's also not terrifying in any sense because everything is new all the time. And so I'm just going to continuously push buttons, see what happens, figure it out. And so that's what we kind of want to instill in our communities, in our, staff, our adults and our students, that whatever comes our way, we'll be able to figure it out. Because then you always be kind of ahead of the game. And I think that's a really important aspect for me. And I think that's why I continuously try to learn, ask questions, kind of dig into stuff, question things. Don't just accept even when majority says certain things. And I think that's a really important skill to kind of develop in ourselves. And I think that will, if we're always willing to learn I think there's a difference between questioning things to hold everyone back and questioning things to move forward, right? Like, why do we have to do this is a question to hold people back, right? But like, hey, give me a better understanding where you're going with this. Like trying to understand how to move forward is, how you ask questions is either a way to move forward or a way to move backward. I'm always trying to move forward in the way I ask those questions.
You're such a curious person.
Curious George, man. I'll tell you, do you remember actually when you had call display and it said your last name first and your first, and I'll tell you, people will be like, Curious George.
I'm not surprised.
They would see it and they would look and it says Couros George, but it kind of looks like Curious George. So I kind of feel, it's kind of.
But curiosity to me is one of the most important ingredients for learning. Let me just say this as we wrap it up, because I loved it that you saved visionary for last, because what I just heard you saying is you may think as a leader what your school's going to need to move forward or to become the kind of place that you would be proud of. But until you have built relationships, until you've adapted that continuous learning mindset, until you've figured out who is on the team, whose talents you can cultivate, and until you're aware of the resources that you have that you can maximize as needed, you're going to have a really hard time knowing what your vision is. So know the lay of the land, be a student of what you're doing, recognize you can't do it alone. And in the context of all that, we talked about so much about complexity today. In the context of that complexity, then you can form a vision that's going to work where you are.
Yeah. And that to me is that, like, this is a question I always get because of innovators mindset, people are like, hey, you're kind of like the change guy. You're all about change, right? So what would be the first thing if you went into a school? What would you change? And my answer will always be the same: nothing. I would change nothing. The first thing I would do is get to know who I'm serving, understand what they're really good at, and then actually make sure they know I know what they're good at, and then we start moving forward. Then we start creating that vision together, because the idea of that, if people feel you are walking into a situation trying to fix everybody, they're going to fight you the entire time. But if they know they're valued, they're willing to move ahead. And I think that's that if you talk about that just 10 years ago, important, way more important now, where people are feeling really ostracized in education, that they're not valued in their communities. I think the principle is so imperative to ensuring those people. We're wrapping up Teacher Appreciation Week, and I actually, this will be out tomorrow. We got to go beyond the idea of like 1 week of teacher appreciation to ensuring that adults feel valued all year long.
Love it. Well, Principal Matters listeners, the book is What Makes a Great Principal: The 5 Pillars of Effective School Leadership. I can't believe it's taken me 426 episodes to finally get George on this show, but you can tell that I have saved one of the best treats of the year for this episode. So thank you, George, for your feedback for this wonderful resource. How can listeners stay connected with you, and any parting words you want to say before we wrap it up?
Yeah. And, my website is georgecouros.com, not .ca anymore, since I live in the US, right? So I got rid of because everyone's like, oh, you're from California. Like, no, it's Canada. So So you can connect with me there. But yeah, like, and if you ever, please feel free. If you ever really, if anyone listening, you can connect with me on Twitter, Instagram is G Couros. I can't say X. I don't know why. I just can't.
I can't
So
either.
I'm trying, but so if you're like, what's Twitter? You are way ahead of me, I guess, if you've like embraced that. But also, like, if you have any questions, like, email me. My email is georgecouros@gmail.com. You're more than welcome to connect with me. I'd love to hear insights. And, if you're reading the book, share it out. Share it with me. Questions we love, because we really want to, we have questions in the book because we want people's ideas. We feel it's a really great opportunity for us to continue to learn and grow. And we're hoping to build more of a community around the book. And so that a lot of principals connect through that and, be better for their schools.
Well, Principal Matters listeners, check out George's website at georgecouros.com, and I will share a link to the book and to his website in the show notes. But George, thank you. What a delightful opportunity
Thanks,
to
my friend.
spend this time with you. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for taking time to listen and to learn. And thanks for doing what matters. We'll
Hey,
talk to you next week.
before you say goodbye, I just want to let you know, like, I've seen you grow. I'm really proud of you. I'm proud that you dived in and you're doing all this stuff. And I think, I obviously I know it's benefited you in a way, but I think what is really powerful is how many people you have benefited from your work. And that's something I just want to say. I'm really proud of you for doing that. And I remember, I distinctly, I can remember the room. I can remember where we were when we connected, and to kind of connect with you. And, other than I'm a little hurt, you waited so many hours to connect with me. Other than that, I'll forgive that. It took me a couple of weeks, but I'm just really proud of the work you're doing, because I know you're helping so many people. And I think the best way to elevate yourself is by elevating others. And I see you do that every single day. So thanks for having me on, and, returning a favor from years ago. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, George. Find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.